My name is Mike Laverick. You may know me from the RTFM education website, rtfm-ed.co.uk. In case you don't know, RTFM stands for quality, integrity. I think you all know what it means. My PowerPoint here has had one little change from the session that I delivered on Monday, which was very well attended. Thank you very much. Because by accident they had me down as the technical marketing manager for Trend Micro. So the word went around, Mike's changed affiliation, and Mike's got this wonderful upgraded job title. So this morning I went in and said, we really need to have RTFM on the PowerPoint, and the lady says to me, what does that stand for? And I said, oh, well, let's not go there. So you're here for SRM, warts and all, if you like. There's really three parts to this presentation, and just as a little disclaimer, I hope that's come across straight away. I know I'm a V expert, and some people call me a guru and all that kind of stuff. I think that's all hooey. Yeah, I'm just Mike. The presentation you're about to see is exactly the kind of stuff I would do to my user group. So, you know, if anybody's got things they want to throw in and even correct things that I say, then fine, because we're all on a learning curve. Every day I learn something about VMware I didn't know the other day. And I think, God, how did I get through life not knowing that? Yeah. So that whole kind of label business, I've got no time for, really. Yeah. But three themes here. A kind of soft thing about my ideas around DR and availability. I kind of wrote this around a theme called spanners and hammers, without realizing that the American audience might not know what a spanner is. So a wrench, yeah. And then the middle part is the meat, as VMware called it, which is some known issues that I've come across over the last couple of years of using SRM. And then the final bit, which is not on the PowerPoint list, probably because I didn't make it there, is where I would like SRM to go through in the next couple of years. I'm speaking directly as a kind of VMware instructor, stroke consultant, stroke author, not speaking from VMware. I'm not here to tell you what VM intends to do. It's what I like VMware to do, if you like. Yeah? So that's kind of the shape of the thing, if you like. So in case you don't know, Site Recovery Manager is a DR automation tool. You have a concept called the protected site, where all your production VMs are running, and you have this thing called the recovery site. I think most people would call that primary or secondary, or primary and DR location, but VMware being what they are, they like to invent their own terms, like a lot of vendors do. So I'll try and stick with the VMware term of protected and recovery site, because that's what you'll see in the documentation and stuff like that. If you want to learn more about SRM, I do have my books now in the bookstore here. They arrived today. And I will be doing a book signing event at 4 p.m. Some of you who arrived a little bit early will have got a free copy of the book lying by the mic stand, because I had a couple of copies there free. VMware sponsored 50 copies. All the money that came from buying those books are going to UNICEF. I'm not taking any royalties on my book this year. So if you buy the book in the bookstore, you will be donating about $15 to UNICEF, who do wonderful things for children worldwide. Yeah, so as an author, you don't make much money out of books. And so this year I decided to give my royalties away to a greater cause. Yeah, so by merely... You'll make me blush. So by going down there and buying a book and saying hi to me, you'll be doing some good as well. Yeah. So, but this session, I don't really want to tell you all about how SRM works as if you've never seen it before. I'm kind of assuming that people have a rough idea what it's about. What was introduced to the SRM 4 release, which was big, was support for a shared site configuration. So previously, you had a one-to-one pairing between the protected site and the recovery site. That made it pretty difficult if people had a kind of central DR location where they wanted to protect multiple sites. And the shared site feature sort of addresses that kind of spoke and hub configuration that some people were looking for. Believe it or not, actually, this shared site feature has been around since SRM 1.0. There was a special switch that you ran against the command line for the setup program, but VMware chose not to tell anybody about it. Yeah? It was only later when the QA work was done that this shared site feature was sort of introduced. Yeah, so those are your two deployment scenarios. So if you like, those are that's the VMware kind of advertisement over and done with. Okay, so let me explain this theme of spanners and hammers, or wrench and hammers. Yeah? You can see in this graphic, I know this is a bit Sesame Street, but there we are, that the hammer is trying to do something with the nut, and the wrench or the spanner is trying to do something with a nail. And the central thing I want to talk about is how, in the last 17 years of being in IT, how I've watched customers time and time again use the wrong tool to fix a problem. Yeah? So they try and take a DR tool and make it into an availability tool, or they try and do the opposite direction, which is take an availability tool and try and stretch that into a DR tool. Now, the idea of doing that, I'm not kind of ideologically against. So anybody here who has a stretched VMware HA cluster between two sites, then good luck to you. Yeah? But I think you've got to be aware of some of the challenges that are associated with that kind of configuration, because very often these products are not designed for that kind of setup in the first instance. Yeah? If you're looking for a way of summing up this section altogether, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, if all you have is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. Yeah? And it's one I've heard a few times, and it was what inspired me to sort of use this particular analogy, if you like. Yeah? So that's the kind of theme. Let me try and unpack that a little bit for you. So I often see customers take availability tools and try and make them into DR tools. Yeah? So a case in point, if you're a VMware customer, the first thing many students ask me, I'm an instructor by Wares doing sort of books and whatnot, is can I do VMware HA across two sites? And I say, you certainly can. It is possible. But was never part of the original design of HA. Yeah? To deliver that for VMware customers. Yeah? All that VMware HA is there for is if you crash or lose an ESX host, it will restart the VMs on another ESX host. So the outage is not about losing a site in that particular sense. It's about losing a platform. It's about losing ESX. And it's kind of weird when I've been teaching the VMware courses, as soon as an availability tool like that comes up, the first thing that customers ask is, can we do X when it was designed for Y? So when VMware FT came out, you know, your primary and secondary, really intended to be run inside a data center. First time I introduced it to a customer, can we do this between sites, they say? I'm like, oh, please, let's try and walk before we run a little on this particular. So the kind of challenges that you'll get if you try and take an availability tool and make it into a DR tool, stretch it outside of the site, is how do you handle the networking? Yeah. So in some cases, you will have to have kind of stretch VLANs to give the impression that node A and node B are residing on the same network. Yeah. It's worth saying that a lot of these tools are designed for service availability within a site. Yeah. So if you think about Never Fail, or if you think about something like Double Take, yeah, as a method of protecting services, yeah, they certainly do work across sites, but they're much easier to get up and running with if it's just a service that you're protecting locally. They're often limited by distance. Yeah? So in terms of DR, we often want our DR location to be well away from the protected site, to be, you know, especially you live in Hurricane Alley, or you come to San Francisco and you happen to be living on the San Andreas Fault. Always makes me a bit nervous when I come here. You know, will there be an earthquake while I'm here? Always relieved when I get back to the UK and it hasn't happened, that kind of thing. And I think the other thing is that most availability tools will also need some kind of heartbeat network, yeah, by which the two nodes can communicate to each other and then work out whether one is down or not. And it's always a recommendation in all availability tools that network has redundancy attached to it. So you're already thinking about, well, I need wide area network and redundancy between two sites, because I could get split brain and any manner of other events occurring because that hasn't been addressed. Yeah? So there's major asks. Most of these availability tools cannot handle the re-IP of a system at another location. So that's why stretch VLANing or netting has to be done to give the impression that they're on the same network. I would say an exception to that is the Never Fail product, which does indeed allow you to have a different IP at the recovery site for the product itself. I've been doing a lot of work recently with Virtual Center Heartbeat service in the last couple of weeks, and I've got a series of articles going out on TechTarget about it. My big anxiety in the last couple of years is how Virtual Center is increasingly becoming a single point of failure to me from a management perspective. Now that I have SRM plugged into it, and I'm going to have Vue plugged into it, and very shortly I'll have the vCloud director plugged into it. The loss of that virtual center service is becoming an increasingly big anxiety to me. So watch out for that in terms of my articles, because it's something I've decided I must address for my own environment. The other thing I think is worth saying about these availability tools, especially if you're a virtualization guy like I am, one of the attractions of things like VMware HA is that it sits outside of the guest operating system. So you can enable it on a cluster, and it protects all the VMs in that cluster. That's great. And I think the reason that people are attracted to that is that they're turned off by the idea of having to install and configure an availability solution for each of their guest VMs, because that's quite burdensome from a kind of admin perspective. And whenever I've looked at these availability tools, whether it's Neverfail or whether it's DoubleTake or even Microsoft clustering, the quality of these availability tools are very much dictated not by the software, but by the person driving that particular technology, the quality of the person who's behind it. Whereas with something like VMware HA, you tick in a box, you click OK. In theory, that's all you have to do, although it doesn't always work out that way, in fairness to VMware. So I'm sure you've all heard kind of crazy stories about this sort of clustering that's either local or stretched. Once you've got two nodes that represent by the same IP address, I've heard stories of customers RDPing into that cluster IP, doing a reboot of one of the servers, and then being shocked to discover that it's still up and running. So they log in again and do another reboot. Are you with me so far? And then about, 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, the phone rings, and somebody says, where's the SQL box gone? And what the guy's been done is basically brought down both nodes in the cluster. I think even so far as I've heard research being done by HP that allege that people with clustered solutions like this, like Microsoft clustering, actually get less good uptime than if it was a single instance service. And you sat there thinking, all that effort that's being made to protect these services, if it's not delivering the greater uptimes, what is the point? Because that's the only measure, really, of these sorts of availability tools, increased uptimes. Yeah? I think the other thing that you will see from these is real-time protection as well, which is quite nice, quicker process, and greater automation, which is something that SRM doesn't do for you. Yeah? Right now, if you have a disaster, it's a C-class decision by the administrator, asking senior management about whether we can, execute the DR plan in SRM. Whereas the thing you get with availability tools is that happening instantaneously without recourse to, asking somebody for their permissions. Yeah. So I thought after sort of pitching this idea of somebody trying to take availability tools and stretch them beyond potentially their capabilities, a bit like a piece of elastic, you can only stretch it so far before it then snaps, is that I had a word with one of my contacts at NetApp and got hold of a PowerPoint presentation slide that I saw earlier this year, which is a side-by-side comparison of NetApp Metro Cluster, an availability solution, to SRM. Yeah? And when I saw this, I was there at NetApp for 2 days. Some of it was very interesting, some of it wasn't really relevant. When this PowerPoint slide came up, it made me set up a notice. Now, first thing, I'm not having a go at NetApp here. Yeah? I love my friends at NetApp. Yeah? They give me a raise that I can work with SRM. I love them. Yeah? I'm just using them as an example, but what I thought was very interesting is that they themselves have done this kind of cross-comparison. Yeah? So in case you don't know, NetApp Metro Cluster allows you to have 2 NetApp filers in 2 different locations. They replicate to each other in real time. It's seamless, so on and so forth. It's a great technology. What I would say, though, is you might notice that I've got its name in capitals. NetApp Metro Cluster. I think very often vendors kind of give away the game in the names of their products about what they intend to achieve with them. Yeah? It's VMware Site Recovery Manager, not VMware Service Recovery Manager, or even VMware Virtual Machine Recovery Manager. And I think very often my customers lose sight of, when the company gives it a product name, they're really kind of giving the game away about what they think this technology is good for. Yeah? So let's have a look at this compare and contrast. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one. That would be a little bit tedious, but I'll pluck out a few because I think it'll make my point. So SRM not distance limited, because you can do synchronous and asynchronous replication, which could be to the other side of this country, whereas Metro Cluster is distance limited. In my experience, that's the main thing that customers seem to forget. And I've got some very humorous examples of where customers have said to me they've got a DR location where quite clearly they haven't. Yeah, that's in the next couple of PowerPoint slides. Virtual Center integrated, yes to SRM, no to Metro Cluster. DR workflow automation, yes with SRM, but no for Metro Cluster, although it does say in the notes you can have recovery plans if you're prepared to do a lot of scripting. Now, between you and me, a lot of my customers who use SRM, that's precisely the thing they were trying to get away from by using SRM, by excessive scripts doing all the legwork and all the grunt work. They wanted a click and drag, point and click method of creating their recovery plans. If SRM was said, there are no recovery plans, you just do scripting, they would have like, well, what do we need this for? Yeah. So, with SRM, you can say, this is my recovery plan for email or for the entire site. This is the order that the virtual machines are brought up. That's something you don't get with this availability tool from Metro Cluster. Now, I'm not saying that's a fault in the NetApp product. It is what it is. And I would say to you, if you go and look at other availability tools that are stretched between sites, you will see much the same thing. But I wasn't going to do this for every chuffing vendor that does availability that's stretched across the site. That would be crazy. Transparent failover, no for SRM, yes for Metro Cluster. So when a failure occurs with Metro Cluster, automatically things get restarted at the recovery site. But with SRM, it's a manual process. Yeah. One of the most common things you'll see on the SRM forums is people saying, I've got SRM working. Is there a way that I can trigger the DR plan automatically? Yeah. And the answer to that question is, yes, you can, if you're prepared to spend a lot of time with .NET objects and delving into I wouldn't call it a CDK, but the APIs for SRM. But normally after saying, yes, it's possible, and here's a forum post where it shows it can be done, the next thing I do is put on my BA Baracus voice and say, don't be a crazy fool. Yeah? What's the measure of you triggering this? A few lost pings? An hour worth of lost pings between the protection and the recovery site? You're going to shut down perfectly fine running VMs that your end users are connected to and start your recovery plan over at the other location. And then once you've had that false positive, that DR event that you didn't want to happen, now go through the innumerable steps to fail back to the protected site. Because one of the downsides of SRM, still to this day, is that the failback process is not easy. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it involves a significant number of steps. For those of you who read and get hold of my book, I made an analogy for the failback process in SRM. And I said it's like you're driving down the freeway and you've got the kids in the back, it's a hot sunny day, yeah, and you've got an hour and a half into your journey and you've just realized you've gone the wrong way, yeah, an hour and a half ago. So you know that at the next junction you're going to have to do a UE, get on the other side of the carriageway and go back an hour and a half before you can then carry on with your real journey. And the next thing your kid says, are we nearly there then? Yeah, are we nearly there, Daddy? So though it can be done, it's not an easy process to go through. And I think what we'll be looking for with the new release of SRM, which I think will come out sometime early next year, is a much more automated method of doing the failbacks and the failovers. And so it goes on, yeah? It's interesting that at the bottom they both say yes to site failure VM protection, yeah? So both claim to be DR tools, yeah? No disrespect to the people at DoubleTake or Neverfail or Microsoft Clustering, but when I was preparing for this over the last couple of months, I said to them, one of my themes is how availability gets confused for DR. And they said, oh yeah, we get that all the time. We get that all the time. Anyway, our availability tool can be used for DR as well. And I'll be like, hang on, have I just had a stroke or an aneurysm? Did that just not register? So, it's not just customers, I feel, get this wrong. We get it wrong. I get it wrong. And I'll give you an example of how I've mistaken X for Y. I was looking at this virtual center heartbeat service, and I think I rather drank the Kool-Aid a little bit before I actually got hold of the product. I looked at the company name, and it said, never fail. Yeah. Now, my expectations were completely wrong for what that product could actually deliver. With the Never Fail and VC Heartbeat service, if the virtual center service dies, it starts to restart the service. If that fails, it will then restart that service on another kind of duplicate virtual center. Yeah? That isn't achieved in nanoseconds. The best I've seen is about 60 seconds, 80 seconds for the time for it to flip over. Yeah? So it's more like HA. When an ESX host crashes, virtual machines get restarted. When virtual center crashes, virtual center gets restarted. So the vSphere client, that closed when the failover happened. If I was trying to do a view deployment of creating new desktops exactly the same time as I murdered my virtual center, that view deployment would go wrong. And initially when I saw that, I was like, ooh, well, this is good. I thought this was meant to be never fail. But I had a kind of FT, fault tolerance perspective of what I thought that technology would do for me, when really it's actually an availability technology. Yeah? So I get it wrong, I see customers get it wrong, and I see the vendors get it wrong. We all get it wrong. So it's no wonder that customers do conflate one to another if we are all kind of, getting it wrong. One thing I would say lastly about this, though, is we are kind of reliant on customers who decide to get it wrong. And I asked the question on Monday, why do customers do this? Why do people try and make SRM be an availability tool? Why do they make availability tools into a DR tool? And one of the answers on my blog to this question was because you can. Technically, if you're prepared to make the effort and do the work, it can be achieved. And he made the argument that by customers doing that, they're pushing the envelope further. And by pressing the vendors like NetApp and VMware to deliver that, then what you then are enforcing is technology innovation. But it's kind of coming from the bottom up rather than from the top down. Now, I have no problem with that. All I would say is your mileage will vary based on the technology that you're using. And it isn't then fair to say, oh, it doesn't do what it said on the tin because you've then stretched it to a place that it wasn't really designed to go to. Yeah? So buyer beware if you want to put it in those terms. Yeah? Now, on the opposite side of that, how about trying to use SRM as an availability tool? Yeah? I'll give you an example of this recently on the forums. There was a chap who said he'd had his entire website environment infected by a virus. Yeah? I guess that does beg the question, how on earth did that happen? But we'll lay that to one side. And he'd used SRM to roll back his website to a previous state. That took some work because if you've got snapshots that are being taken every 30 seconds, he would have to manually promote the right version of that snapshot up the stack to make sure that when he ran his recovery plan, the right version of the website was restored. SRM defaults to just bringing back the latest sync. So if it's every half an hour that you're doing the replication and the virus is 3 hours old, he would have to manually put at the top of that stack the snapshot or the replication value that said, please give me what was 3 hours old. There is no kind of button in SRM that says, I want to run my recovery plan, but please bring back my virtual machines in the state they were an hour, a day, a week ago. Now, there are certainly technologies from the storage vendors that allow you to do that, but currently there's no integration from VMware to speak to the array to actually get that out of the system. Yeah? It's just whatever the latest thing you had. Yeah? But I was quite surprised that this guy had done this because I sat there thinking, so you lose a service, your website, maybe it's losing you millions of dollars per half an hour, but the main recoverability for that in the event of a virus attack is to engage a DR plan. I just thought that was a bit excessive. Now, you could argue if he's got nothing else, hammers and nails again, then what else have you got to do? He was caught between a rock and a hard place. But it did, to me, beg the question of, what contingencies had been made prior to using it. So again, I've got nothing against the guy doing that, but I just wondered whether that was the correct or the right use for SRM in that particular case. So what are some of the limitations or challenges if you try and make SRM be like an availability tool? Well, first of all, you're down to the smallest unit in terms of SRM is the LUN or the volume. So if you have a volume that's replicated, everything in that volume is protected by SRM. Yeah? So that means, you're going to be pretty careful about being able to recover just a website service or recover a cluster of Exchange hosts because they're going to have to be kind of paired off into the right kind of LUNs in the first place. Currently, the product doesn't allow you to say, here's a volume with 20 virtual machines, but I only want to protect one of them and not the other 19. There's no granularity between the storage vendor and VMFS for them to say, okay, we understand this volume has got VMFS on it, or NFS for that matter, and we only want to take individual files across. Yeah? I think we will have to wait until VMware does some more work with the storage vendors for that level of intelligence, because I think what customers want to do is right-click a VM and say, enroll this in my DR plan. Yeah? Not use just LUNs as the crude way of controlling that. A bit like what we do with FT. People right-click and enable FT. People want to be able to right-click and say that VM is in the recovery plan, not everything or nothing. Yeah? And it's perhaps worth saying as well, even if you've got synchronous and asynchronous replication, there are ancillary files that make up the virtual machine which are quite costly. So if you've got a 16 gig virtual machine with a zero reservation, you have got a 16 gig VM kernel swap file for that VM being replicated as well. So for every megabyte you own in the protected site, you're wasting a megabyte in your DR location and the bandwidth associated to do that in the first place. So I think VMware need to do some work on the kind of ancillary files so we relocate them to elsewhere. Right now, if you want to say one particular VM kernel swap is held somewhere else, you've got to touch the VMX file on a per virtual machine basis. And I'm sure a lot of people here would think, that isn't something I really fancy doing on a daily basis for every VM that gets created. I was chatting to a guy last night in a bar, and he was saying they're creating 100 VMs every week in their environment. So, I mean, imagine what it'd like if only like 50% or 20% of those needed modifying on a per VM basis to then enroll them into a recovery plan and exclude the swap file. Yeah. So there's a hint in the name again, site recovery manager, not service or server, but the loss of the entire site. It does mean, I think, if you want a kind of application-based where I only fail over a website, you're going to have to be very careful with the LUNs that you've got and make your applications be in the right LUNs. Certainly, if you want to lost one individual virtual machine and you want to fail it over, that's very difficult to achieve with the product, because what you'll get is every VM listed in a protection group, 20, 30, 40, and then you'd have to put 39 of them into don't recover this VM. Yeah? So that certainly can be done. It's an awful lot of clicking, moving VMs out of a recovery plan to a place where they don't power on. The other thing I would say is when you hit that button, it does power off VMs in the protected site as it recovers them in the recovery site. So you'd have to be very careful that you didn't accidentally power off something that was perfectly fine. So guess what I've seen customers do? Yeah? They do a recovery, but they only want to do a recovery in 5 VMs. Accidentally, another 5 are in that list. There's nothing wrong with them. Somebody hits the button to do the recovery plan, and now they've got 10 outages rather than the 5. Yeah, you'd be surprised how easy it is to do. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is, does that meet your RTO? As SRM can't be automated, oh, well, it can, but you'd be a bit crazy. If your RTO is a very short one, like minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, the time it takes to get the approval to run the recovery plan may be greater than the recovery time objective. So unless you can DEFCON 1 that and make it something that you can do without much approval, it really doesn't pan out that way for very short RTOs. Yeah. The other thing I would say about SRM just generally, in terms of a limitation, is it still really doesn't address the physical side of things. Yeah. A good example of this is I've got customers who run Microsoft SharePoint where the web front end is virtualized, but the back-end SQL databases are still on physical. Anybody got that kind of configuration in their own environment? Look at the hands go up. So what's your recovery plan if SRM is the only tool you're going to use to fix all the ills in the world for those boxes? A stretched cluster of them, log shipping of the SQL data. I think what we really need from VMware going forward is for them to plug into their vConverter engine to allow us to P2V those physicals into a virtual environment for DR purposes only. That's something we really don't have. In fact, that's something I'll come on to a bit later, but as I've stumbled on it, I'll say it now. If you do a P2V of a physical box, make that into a virtual machine, and then either try to enable FT on it, fault tolerance, or enable it for SRM, it will fail. Now, the reason being is that virtual machine will contain lots of legacy devices like serial ports and parallel ports, which are simply incompatible with the agenda of FT and incompatible with SRM. Now, this is how you currently get a P2V virtual machine to be enrolled in a part of FT. You do the conversion. Yeah? It appears as a VM. You then unregister it. Yeah? Delete the VMX file and all the other files that are created, but don't delete the VMDK file. You then create a brand new VM, point it at the VMDKs, and then power it on. And of course, by creating a brand new VM, you create a VM that doesn't have any of those legacy devices, and therefore it's okay. Ugly, isn't it? Nobody wants to go through that process. So it's something I want VMware to do. They're going to have to do an awful lot of work to achieve that. My other anxiety is I've been using VMware's P2V tools, as they once called, since 2003, 2004, back when it was a Debian CD that you booted from. I've always found hot P2Vs less reliable than some sort of cold clone process, because obviously on a cold clone process, no files are open. There's diddly squat in memory, and therefore you get complete file handles to everything on the disk. But I don't think anybody here wants a DR solution where once a day or once a week, your physical boxes are shut down, booted to a CD-ROM, P2V'd across, shut down, and then brought back up online again. It's just not going to work. So I think VMware are going to have to do an awful lot of work on that vConverter P2V engine to make it much more robust than it currently is. I mean, I don't know what people's experiences here have been, but I've taken the same physical box and tried to do a hot clone, nothing doing. Shut down the physical box, boot to a cold clone CD, works first time. The annoying thing about the hot clone process is that very often you get to 99%, and that's when it fails. Yeah? After spending an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours watching a darn status bar go by, sometimes when I see that, I think, just fail at 1%. At least I'm not waiting here with my finger up my butt, not knowing when this thing is going to complete or when it's going to fail or not. So we definitely need that engine a bit more robust than it currently is. Yeah? And as I mentioned already, automated SRM, triggering automatic failovers, although it can be done through the CDK, it is not something that's officially supported from VMware. Yeah? So that's the kind of spanners and hammers side of thing. Just to summarize that, I want to give you a couple of examples of some of the crazy stuff that I've seen customers doing in the environment. So since I've been doing VMware courses and writing books on VMware, the number of people who've said to me that they do vMotion for DR, I used to get it on a weekly basis. Yeah? And this is prior to the kind of vPlex, long-distance vMotion that the storage vendors have been crowing about in the last 6 to 9 months. So whenever I had a customer say, oh, we're okay, we do vMotion for DR, the first thing I'd say to them, this is back in 2004, 2005, so how far away is the DR location? And the best one I got was, it's 150 meters away. That's their DR location. Now, between you and me, titty not, between you and me, there are some merits in having a DR location that is close, but not that close, my friend. Yeah? So-called async or sync to site A to site B, and then a larger async to another distance. I think there's some merits in doing that to get around technological barriers, but it really doesn't count as a DR location. And I don't think we were helped in the early days by Microsoft, because on the Microsoft blogs, I used to read from Microsoft, look, vMotion can't be used in the event of a disaster, they would say. And they'd pull up a VMware PDF, say, look, even in the PDF, it says you can't use vMotion for DR. And I'm like, well, VMware never, ever made a claim that vMotion would be used for DR, ever. Yeah? And I used to say to my Microsoft friends, it's like saying to the guy who's invented the wheel, that's a really great concept, but you could really do with it being a bit more square. Yeah? The way we can improve the wheel is by putting some right angles into it. And I'd say to my Microsoft friends, you're really not getting this concept of the wheel, are you? So what I mean is that vMotion was always about maintenance windows, and then later on with DRS, moving the VM to improve the performance of the VM, not to improve the balance or workload on a ESX host. Yeah? My favorite one was a customer who asked me, I've got point-to-point laser links between 2 sites. Can I do vMotion between them for DR? And I said, well, I don't know. I tend not to have laser links in my lab environment, never use the technology. But I said to him, if you ever do get it working, will you please tell me? And I'll come and see you in Germany when you've got this set up. But I'll wear a complete Dr. Evil outfit from Austin Powers. And so I can say, I'm just about to do a vMotion with a laser, $100 million, so crazy, crazy stuff. Another example, I wrote an article for TechTarget again about how SRM may, or more likely, does not integrate with VMware View. Yeah? One of the most common things I hear is people say, if you use virtual desktops, then you solve your DR problem. And I'm like, well, not if I've got 3,000 of them. That then becomes a DR problem to me. If I lose the site where all those desktops are actually located, how do I bring back that environment at the DR location? And I was pretty much like kind of going out on a limb, trying to work out a way by which maybe SRM would or would not interface with View. And somebody responded to that article, and they said that this is my config. So they had 2 virtual centers with the virtual center heartbeat service, split in 2 different sites. And I don't know whether you know View very well, but it has a connection service, and the kind of storage engine behind it is Microsoft's Lightwork directory service. So you basically have a sync. Once you've got 3 or 4 connection servers, they're all identical. So no prizes guessing what he did. He split them across 2 sites. Yeah? And I said, oh, that's pretty impressive. Can I ask how far away the other site is? And he said, it's about 45 miles away. I said, fair enough. I said, if you got hit by a hurricane, that went through the entire state, where would you be then? And the quote, "We'd be screwed," was his answer in the email. So again, it was another example of he was stretching things out, but hadn't really considered the true DR implications of a site that was that small away. Now, in the UK, 45 miles away is another city in the UK. I live in such a pissant small country. 45 miles away is actually quite a distance. But in this country, with the kind of extremes of weather and things that you have that we don't have in the UK, I think it's a much bigger consideration, the distance issues of getting it as far away as possible. I guess you've all heard the stories of people whose primary site was in one of the towers in New York, and their DR location was in the opposite tower. So it's a bit of, I wonder whether that's even an urban myth now, but it's got to be a decent enough distance away, and that's where you'll start to feel the challenges of availability tools. Yeah. And the other thing I will say, I won't dwell on this slide because I feel I've been going on about this particular topic for too long, is when customers said to me, I'm going to use vMotion for DR, I said, that's great for a planned event, like some sort of power maintenance is going to be done. You can't get approval for a diesel or generator because you are in a built-up area. It's regarded as a fire risk by the local authorities, and therefore you've got an opportunity to do it. But if you get a sinkhole open just underneath you, or Mr. Bin Laden doesn't seem to ring people up prior to carrying out some hideous event and rings you up there a week or so before thinking he's about a plan to do something, and maybe you should think about the location of your VMs. We've got to really consider any event. It has to be covered by a disaster, So I'm in favor of long-distance vMotion. I think it's cool. I think EMC vPlex is cool. It's personally way out of the price range of any of my customers. They can't afford to do that kind of thing. And I don't think it'll answer all your DR issues because of the limitations on the distance. I think it's something like 150 kilometers max for something like vPlex. I don't know whether anybody can correct me on that. It might even be shorter. Yeah. Okay, so that's the kind of don't confuse one thing for another part of this. And this is kind of a little bit easier to digest. It's about various bugs, various things I've seen with the product, kind of a heads up. I don't know how useful this is. I used to teach courses with troubleshooting modules, always at the end of them. And what I found was I could list all the problems in the world that the customer might experience, but until they actually faced the problem, it didn't really have much of an effect. What I found in my training courses is that the best way to do troubleshooting was to send the guys out for an hour and a half at lunchtime and bust everything I could find, and then invite them in for the afternoon and say, set to it, because that's much more realistic. You have no idea why the problem occurred. So I don't know how useful you'll find this, but I'll flag it up anyway. Some arrays in SRM do need to do a rescan of the host bus adapters twice. A case in point, from my own personal experience, is the HP EVAs. It's not the end of the world. You basically edit either the VMware DR XML file or the advanced settings, and you change a parameter from being rescan just once to rescan twice. Yeah. I don't know whether there are any HP EVA customers in here at all, whether you've come across this already. It might have been fixed with a firmware update or something like it. Yep. Another issue, snapshots. Now, you'll be surprised to hear that snapshots are not officially supported by the SRM product. And even worse still, they're not even experimentally supported either. Yeah? Now, what I would say is most people on the forums and most of my customers have had very good experiences with snapshots. I'm not really too sure why VMware doesn't support snapshots with SRM, because the feature, if you like, has gone all the way back to ESX2. Because back in the ESX2 days, we used to call them redo logs, of which you could only have 2 levels, primarily used for backups and things like that. And then with VI3, we got this snapshot feature with, a gazillion levels of snapshots and so on and so forth. I think that maybe the reason why they are uncomfortable in officially supporting them is, obviously, you can do a revert with the snapshot. So what happens if you do a revert of a snapshot just before you run your recovery plan, at the point of running the recovery plan, or just after? What frequency of replication have you got that would include whether a snapshot was taken or not taken? So there's no guarantee from a VMware perspective that they can guarantee that your snapshots will be there at the DR location. The reason I have an anxiety about this is that my main use of snapshots is not in a developer's kind of world, where I take a snapshot before I apply a service pack or run an update or something. It's for backup. So if you're using Veeam, if you're using VDR from VMware, if you're using PhD technologies, they all use the VMware snapshot to unlock the files before they ship the files, the VMDKs, somewhere else by whatever method, change block tracking or whatever. So I would really like to see some movement on this particular support issue, because does that mean if a virtual machine is in a backup window and then I run the DR plan sometime afterwards, what consistency does my data in? Is that something I can say to the business I can guarantee? More or less the position from VMware is you're on your own. It's not supported. At least if it was experimentally supported, you would have a feeling that more or less they got it cracked and it was just a QA issue. But when it's not even experimentally supported, you're left in the dark about whether they have any intention of changing their support stance on this. Storage vMotion. Now, if you take a virtual machine that's, say, on local storage, something that's not replicated, and you pump that up to a data store that is replicated with, say, MirrorView or SnapMirror, then it'll be enrolled in the data store, and it'll say needs protecting. Not a problem. Where the wheels tend to come off is if you're doing other storage vMotion events. Now, the annoying thing about this is that this was in the SRM 1.0 product, and it's also here in the SRM 4 product. So no improvement has been made between the lifetime of these 2 releases, which I think is a bit of a disappointment. The other thing I would say about this just generally is it does, I think, occasionally give an indication that within VMware, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So did the SRM team never even consider storage vMotion or test that? Did the storage vMotion team, whoever developed that, never think about the implications for something like SRM? To the degree that I sometimes say it's not that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The left hand doesn't even know that the right hand even exists. Never mind whether they communicate to each other. So if you do a replication of a VM away from a replicated store to a non-replicated storage, then what you'll get is an invalid reference, and it's pretty easy to fix. You basically select the VM and you remove the protection from it. Everything is then rosy in the garden. But you would think that process would already pre-automated. So everything is fine when you go to protect something, but when you're deprotecting something, that then becomes a manual operation. Now, the reason this is a bit of an irritation to one of my customers is that what he gets an awful lot is people creating new virtual machines and then putting them on the wrong type of storage. Because I guess you've got VM customers, if I can call them that, people who just use the end product that you guys set up and put together, and they just go through the wizard and they basically sort the data stores by the one that has the most free space, and they go, that's where my VM goes. To the point that they sometimes even put it on local storage and then wonder why it's not protected by HA or not being moved by DRS, or they've got vMotion errors. I think the only thing that you could say, in fairness to VMware, is with vSphere 4, you can now create folders in the data store view and set permissions on them. So at least you can kind of filter what the user can see, maybe excluding all local storage, but it's a little bit tricky, to say, well, sometimes when they create a VM, we do want to protect that. Other times it's just a scratch VM that's only going to live for a couple of hours, and therefore we don't. And there isn't much way that we can kind of guide the user beyond that, even with permissions. The second one is if you move a VM from one protected data store to another protected data store, It doesn't understand to de-enroll it from the protected group at one location and re-enroll it in the destination. So what you'll get is this error message that says, already protected in whatever the name of the protection group is. Yeah? Now, the workaround for this is not particularly nice. You go back to its original source protection group, unprotect it, and then come back to the new protection group, and then say protect it. And then everything is, again, rosy in the garden. But it's for you to resolve those storage remotions rather than for VMware to do that. And it irks me a little bit when you have a feature which goes back to the previous generation, yeah, that in the new generation we still have these particular issues. Yeah? So watch out for storage remotion and SRM. Sometimes they don't play very well together. VApps and Fault Tolerance. Very simply, you can protect a VM that's got FT enabled on it, and you can protect the VMs within a VApp. But when you run your recovery plan, it will not create a VApp object at the recovery site for you. And if it was an FT-enabled VM, then it won't be FT-enabled at the recovery site either. So there seems to be a lack of intelligence, if you like, in SRM 4 for some of the vSphere 4 new objects and features. Yeah? They just treat them like an ordinary VM. Now, currently, the workaround for this is to use a little bit of PowerCLI, and you can use PowerCLI to create a new VApp object. And you can use PowerCLI, I've got some examples here, to re-enable FT. So after the VM is powered on, the next part of your script that would call out would then say, now FT enable this. I guess VMware could say, well, not every VM inside a VApp might actually need to be recovered. And they could say, well, not every VM that you have FT enabled in the production site might necessarily be FT enabled in the recovery site. But if you consider it, if you actually are running your DR for real, who knows how long you'll be at the recovery site for? Could be weeks, months, years. You might never, ever go back to the primary site because it ain't there anymore. Yeah? So, I mean, that's a consideration both in terms of how much resources do I need to get beyond just a week or 2 weeks of DR for acceptable usage. How do I then quickly ramp that up so I can actually run a full production load on it and have the features that I used to enjoy at the protected site still there at the recovery site? So, again, I'd like some tidying up to be done here. For the products to be more locked together than they are currently. How am I doing for time? What time is it now? Somebody shout out the time. 22, okay. I don't have a watch with me, my mobile's off because I don't want to go with the microphone. So, SRM and Firewalls. This one is especially ugly, I'm sorry to say. There has been an issue with SRM speaking to SRMs between firewalls and to the virtual center service at either location, which leads to disconnects. And I think this is more or less like a kind of keep alive thing, that when you have a HTTP session, it's opened, and then a lot of firewalls, if that HTTP session then doesn't take any packets for a certain amount of time, the firewall just then ends that HTTP session. So there's no keep alive on it. Now, the ugly part of this is that it's been an issue in SRM 1, SRM 4, SRM 4.01, and then it got fixed in SRM 4.02. Great. However, the problem came back in SRM 4.1. Yeah? So you would assume that once a bug fix has been into the fix, then all future versions will have the same code base and therefore would not have the error. Now, I understand the reason this happened is that the kind of patch cycles for the 4.02 release, they were trying to get this bug fix out quickly for existing customers on that base, but the roadmap and the timings for the 4.1 release weren't in sync with that. So it wasn't on a train where one carriage is attached to another carriage is attached to another carriage. They actually had a kind of schedule window and a QA window that kind of was running in tandem. Now, a couple of things about this, it was a member of my London user group who brought this to my attention because I'd not seen it. It was him that did all the legwork to find this problem because VMware PSO weren't especially helpful, what can you say? And after they got it resolved, the next thing is they had one of their TAMs saying, when are you going to upgrade to vSphere 4.1? And he said, we can't. And he said, why? Because 4.1 version of SRM brings this firewall issue back for them. So they're basically locked into update 2, even though they would like to go SRM 4.1. If they rolled out vSphere 4.1 and then upgraded to SRM 4.1, it would then fail again for the same reason. It looks like there'll be another maintenance release for the 4.1 release sometime the beginning of next year, from what my customer's saying to me. So that's really, for the next 6 months, they're stuck with the platform they've got. He's extremely disappointed that A, this situation has arisen, and B, the time he's having to wait. Why did this happen? Well, I can't completely say cast iron guarantee that the cause of this, but I'll say it anyway. It appears that when the testing is done with firewalls and SRM, that they're not using hardware-based firewalls for the test, and that they're actually using a lot of software-based firewalls like Microsoft ISA Server, rather than, say, a Juniper firewall or a SonicWall firewall or a Cisco firewall. So I think the solution to this problem is for the QA to be done against more production-style equipment that customers will be using in the real world, rather than some sort of firewall product that I can get for free through my MSDN subscription. Yeah? No disrespect to the Microsoft ISA server. I'm sure it's wonderful. But it's not what my customers use. It's not seen as corporate. My SMB customers will use it quite happily. In fact, a lot of them have moved on to this VATA, free virtual appliance for their firewalling, because it's very, very robust and it's very easy to set up. Doesn't cost any Microsoft licensing. But, you know, I don't see Microsoft ISA Server in the corporate space. It's usually a big black box with firewall glowing on the front of it. Yeah. Also, something to watch out for is a problem with distributed virtual switches, which of course only affect Enterprise Plus customers. That might not be you. This is something I actually saw in the beta program for SRM 4.0, and I raised it as an issue with the team that I work with in the UK on the EMEA side of SRM. And I said, I keep on losing my mappings between the DVS port groups at the production side to the DVS port group settings at the recovery. I mean, literally, I map VLAN 10 to VLAN 51. It'll be there for a couple of hours or a couple of days. I'd run a recovery plan, and I'd get this network device needed, recovered by the machine, couldn't be found at recovery time, and then go back to the inventory, and the mapping would just be blank. Now, I must admit, when I saw this, I thought, that looks like a bug to me, and I raised it as an issue, and unfortunately, nobody within VMware had actually seen this at all. I kind of put it down to my lab environment, because it's a lab environment. It gets poked around. I do all kinds of things that I shouldn't do, and then when you get unexpected outcomes at the other end, there's a part of me that goes, well, is that me? Did I screw that up? Maybe this isn't a bug, maybe this is my build, I've done something wrong, that kind of thing. So I kind of blame myself sometimes. And it did turn out to be actually a problem in the product. It has been addressed, so it's been resolved if you're on SRM 4.02 and you're on vSphere U2. Alternatively, if you're on the vSphere 4.1 release, you need the SRM 4.1 release to fix this issue. So in this particular case, unlike the firewall example, both code bases had the same bug fix at the same time. Yeah? So it has been resolved, but it's something to watch out. I mean, I talk about vSphere 4.1 like everybody's on it, and I know that isn't the case. For you guys, rolling out a new version of the VMware platform might be a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month, 18-month exercise, and so therefore you can't get there tomorrow. So I sort of see these problems very early. Hopefully by the time you get to actually going into your rollout, some of these issues are being addressed. Yeah. A KB article number there if you want to look it up. Scripts in the recovery plan. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I think there's a lot of legwork to be done with getting scripts to work in a recovery plan. There's lots of writing very lengthy bits of text into edit boxes and making sure that you tell SRM what particular command interpreter you're using. So is it a batch file? Is it a WMI script? Is it a PowerShell script? What I'd really like to see VMware do is kind of allow me to have like a script repository, a file share where I put all my PowerShell scripts. And then when I create my recovery plans, I hit new script, browse, and I then browse to that library of scripts. The other thing I want them to do is do more work in terms of the authentication issues. Now, I might be wrong on this because I haven't been working with SRM 4.1 at all because I haven't had time. But as I understand it, scripts execute under the context of the SRM service, something like local machine or network service. So that means if you do need your script to then authenticate the virtual center, you can't use its credentials. You have to then have credentials embedded in the script to handle that issue. So that introduces the whole obfuscation, I don't want passwords, clear text inside scripts kind of issue. And I think VMware could do an awful lot to sort of fix this. What you'll read in my book is I write the PowerShell script. This one, first bit of PowerShell, on recovery reduces by half the amount of memory to the VM that's being recovered. So if my VM in the protected site was 4 gig, I use a script to then reduce the amount of memory in the DR location to make it 2 gig. It was one of the most popular questions on the forums, so I thought I'd work out how to do it. I guess the reason why people want to do this is they don't have like-for-like memory resources in the DR location, and they're prepared to suffer a degradation of service or to be a little bit more parsimonious with their memory than they would be if it was the production location. So that's the first part of the script. To make it neater, I actually create a batch file, believe it or not. Batch files? Isn't that kind of Windows 3, DOS 6 era? Batch files, just to keep it simple. So without this, I would have to have said, here's the PowerShell, and here's the PowerShell library I would like to load up with it, the snap-in, and here's the script I want to run. And it's like, as long as your arm and then, round and round and round again, I wanted to try and keep it neat. So I could have one batch file that I call redirect.bat, and then all I have to do is put the path to indicate where the actual PowerShell is to keep it simple. I'm not a big fan of batch files, but it kept it short and sweet. Now, one teaching point on this particular thing, which is, you'll laugh at this, I'm quite open to admitting the mistakes I've made, because people learn from that, is a bit of a Newtonian thing. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So I ran this script, ran my recovery plan, worked like a charm, all my virtual machines' amount of memory had gone down by half. Then I failed back and tried it again, failed back and tried it again, failed back, tried it again. Are you getting this? Until Windows only had 16 meg worth of memory. And I was like, Houston, we have a problem here. So that went into the book as an example of an error I made. So my point being is, it's great to have this kind of script integration, but in your recovery plan, you're going to have, if in my case, a script that reinflates the VM back to its original memory status. Because once you've halved the amount of memory or changed the properties of the VM, that then becomes part of the replication cycle when you go back in the opposite direction. So, I don't know what you think of me doing that. You probably thought it was quite funny. I personally thought, oh, God, what an idiot. How could I make such a fatal mistake? But I guess it's through our mistakes that we learn. And as long as you learn from them and not constantly repeat them, it's not a bad thing. So, last 2 PowerPoint slides. Back to the future. The flux capacitor. What do I want to see coming out of SRM? Now, the first thing to say is these are my ideas, these are my opinions. They in no way reflect the NDA or roadmap for SRM. So it's a bit of blue sky thinking. As you probably gathered, what I'm looking for is much better integration with the new vSphere 4 features, VApp and FT, and a house cleaning on some of the features that have been around for some time, like VI 3.5, storage vMotion. I guess we could take that for a given. The other problem I've seen customers have, and I've had, is the turnaround and the QA of the site recovery adapter. Now, in case you don't know, this is usually a couple of scripts that handle the process of authenticating to the array, saying, mount a snapshot for me, I'm doing a test, or stop the replication, promote the LUN to be read-writable and primary, because currently it's passive and read-only, and let the plan run through. Increasingly, I've heard stories of the storage vendor having an SRA that fixes a bug, and it's 2.19. But when you go to the VMware website to download the SRA, it's 2.17 or 2.16 that's in the list. So the turnaround in getting new SRAs that fix bugs does seem to be a bit of a big one. And I think that what causes this is a little bit of politics, because, say you were a vendor and I'm hosting your code on my site. If I put your code on my site and then there's a problem, it's not you that takes the hit from it, I take the hit from it because I did that upload. Now, you would think for that reason that VMware do a lot of QA and testing of these SRAs that come through from EMC and others, and the answer to that is no, they don't. The testing is very, very similar, I think, to the way ESX is tested on a ProLiant, or on I don't know, any other blade platform, there's a list of tests, criteria that must be passed, but it's the vendor that really tests and puts a tick-off box into each of those. And then it gets put into a QA cycle. And it's that thing that seems to be where the stymie points are. Yeah? To the point that I've sometimes taken a back channel to people I know at EMC, like Chad Sakic and his crew, or Vaughan Stewart, saying, I've got this problem. Is there a in-house SRA that would fix this for me because it's becoming a bit of a roadblock in what I'm writing? So I definitely want to see a much tighter relationship and a faster turnaround. One of my suggestions to the SRM team and to the PM is, why doesn't VMware just give up on putting the SRAs on their own website? Yeah? That you just have SRM, the code, and then links for all the different vendors then takes them to their website. And therefore, it's them that take the responsibility if that SRA doesn't work. And VMware says, we partner very closely, but if there's a problem, don't talk to us, talk to the guys at EMC. They're the people who wrote that bit of code. And I think that would speed up the process of those SRAs being out and about much faster. Yeah. The other thing I want to see, mentioned earlier, is P2V for DR. And I think this is a funny one, actually, because when I first got involved in VMware, I used to get customers coming up to me going, this VMware lark, people actually use it in production? And I'd go, oh, yeah. And they were like, oh, really? And they'd even asked me to list some customers that were using it in production because they really canned it as this is something for test and dev. This is something for legacy apps where we can't carry on running NT4 on that hardware platform because it's no longer supported, or it's for DR. But it strikes me as somewhat odd that 7 years down the line, that goal of a virtualized DR hasn't been offered in the sense for not just for virtual machines as what we get with SRM, but also physicals. Yeah? So I really want that to be delivered because it's a promise that was around in the early days of virtualization, which still really hasn't been addressed. Quick little one at the end, VM groups. I don't know how many people here have actually used Site Recovery Manager on a daily basis, but if you've got 300 VMs, they all get enrolled in a flat list. Somebody calling. Not me. And then they have to use little arrow buttons to move the VMs up and down in the recovery plan. So if you have 300 VMs, and the 299th one is at the bottom of the list, and it should be the one that is recovered first, you click, you click, you click, you click, you click, please stop me, until it's at the top of the list. Yeah, they're not even, you can't even pick up the object and drag and drop it up the list. Yeah, which, when that was shown in SRM1, I was like, who invented this UI? Yeah? Do I need to, employ a team of monkeys to click on the mouse and say, keep on doing that for another 299 times, and then I'll tell you to stop? So I definitely want to see an ability to create some sort of group object where I can throw all my VMs in that bucket and then move the bucket to the right place in the location. Because, if you've got some sort of application that scales out for availability and for fault tolerance, like a website, you're not really that bothered which one of those web servers comes up first. So you're basically treating it like a lump of resource that you want to move up and down. Now, from what I was chatting with one of the SRM guys, Michael White, here in the US, it does look like this VM groups idea is going to make the next release. So thank you for that. So it will be there. Other things I would like to see is a proper export-import copy of my recovery plans. Okay, this is my last slide. I'll finish up very quickly. At the moment, if I want to back up SRM, I'm looking at backup in a database. There's no way I can get to the metadata that makes up SRM and actually export that into another format, bring it in. Why I want a copy feature is so I can make many, many different recovery plans that are all slightly different from each other. That will certainly avoid me having to click up and down arrows all the time. Yeah? Every new recovery plan, I'm back to clicking those arrows up and down again. Yeah? What else do I want? Moving VMs to the cloud. I think the future of SRM is the R being removed out of it, and for Site Manager to be plugged into the new Cloud Director, Chargeback, and vShields module. Currently, SRM is incompatible with the cloud offering that was announced this week. Yeah? But I think rather than people vMotioning their VMs from a private cloud to a public cloud, it is more likely that you'll be able to set up some kind of replication channel between you and the external party, and then do a failover of your VMs to the other location. So I think that's going to be a work in process. Per virtual machine protection, mentioned that already. It's great that we have the shared site feature, but a lot of my customers have what I call a triple hop DR solution, where site A is synchronously replicated to site B, and then asynchronously replicated to site C. And that's not a configuration that really plays out very well with SRM at the moment. And given all the talk I've mentioned about distances, that's the real reason I want it. I'm not sure whether this is already run. I put this on the Monday session. But there is a features for SRM, and one of that is about host-based replication, which will be very attractive to anybody here who operates in the SMB market, because the SMBs, they need DR as much as the big guys. So there's plenty of other SRM sessions going on. But I think that's all I've got to say. And so thank you very much. These are your next steps.